Good morning. It's Monday, 6/11. Here we go. Hope you've had a good weekend. Happy Mother's Day, belated to those I may not have been able to check with or contact with. What a great and grand weekend it is to think about the mothers that are in our lives, our personal mother, those that may have been surrogate mothers to us. They mentored us like teachers. It was good to acknowledge my wives and mothers in our own families, and that was really a blessing. Again, trying to also, it's difficult for some mothers through this weekend who have lost children for whatever reason, and some have distanced themselves, some have gone on and passed away. We know that it's hard as well, and we're mindful of that. We're getting into our study this week, and today we'll spend time kind of getting set up. We're going to look at some other resources again. We're starting a study on Priscilla and Aquila, and this week we want to focus on, put a little bit of focus on, we have probably 5-6 scriptures specifically addressing Priscilla and Aquila. But that is the skeleton. And what we want to do is we want to create a dialogue. And I don't think that we are going to misrepresent what Aquila and Priscilla were living in the time that they were living with the scriptures that we have. But the meat to the bones that we're going to look at are going to deal with history, geography. It's going to look at then the scriptures themselves. And we're going to be able to paint this picture of who Aquila and Priscilla are and what they did with their life in spite of the difficulties they faced in a world, much like Noah, in a world that was opposing Christianity. And we're going to show you that in just a second. In the meantime, let me show you a couple of resources that I would encourage you with. These are it right here. One is called Baker's Bible Atlas. This is an older version here. I'm sure you can find it online, and probably there's probably an online source that you could use and not even have to pay out of pocket for. And then another one I like, this is a revised book on manners and customs of Bible times. It's been updated, and if you're like me, I like good colorful pictures, and this gives you some insight as well. Again, a lot of these resources you could actually just look up online. You could Google manners and customs of the Bible, and you'll have dozens of possibilities to look at. So, excuse me. Let's get started here then with Priscilla and Aquila. The first place we want to start with is where the texts take us, okay? And again, you'll recall that I have an online source, and you can do it as well. But you'll note that in the search, the Bible search, I just put in Aquila's name. Because wherever you go in the Bible, wherever you go, you're never going to see Aquila without Priscilla and Priscilla without Aquila. What a great testimony. This married couple did everything in ministry together. We could probably stop right there and just have a humble time before the Lord saying, you know what, and my wife and I, are we doing it together? With that, when you put that in, it comes up with 5 primary verses, and you'll see them listed here. Primarily, we're going to look at Acts 18, but we'll see a text here in Romans, 1 Corinthians, and then 2 Timothy as well, okay? And so that's why we want to kind of consider this being the skeleton, and then we're going to add now the flesh and bones. So let's start with history. The writing of the book of Romans is common. It's many believe it was written, Romans and Corinthians were written very closely together by the Apostle Paul around mid-50s AD. Now, it's interesting that this is where we see Aquila and Priscilla come forth. And our text in Acts chapter number 18 gives us a little bit of history. So let's go there. So what I can do with my Bible app here is I can move this table out of the way, which was my search table. And now I have, when I click on, let me just come over here. When I click on this Acts 18, it automatically brings up the entire text over here on Acts 18. So here's our text. After these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth. So that tells us where he's at. He's actually was in Athens. Now we bring in a little bit more flavor to the story. What happened in Athens? Well, we know that from Acts 17, Mars Hill. Remember that great dialogue? Paul's been brought before these great philosophers, great knowledge seekers on Mars Hill, and it's among all these sculpted gods of Greece. And there is a sculpted idol to the unknown God, and Paul addresses it. He says, you are a superstitious people, but let me tell you who this unknown God is. And he preaches powerfully to them of the God of the universe, of Jesus Christ. And they say, oh, that's interesting. We'll hear you again someday. And we know Paul moves on, and that's why we see this. He's departed Athens, and he's coming to Corinth. By the way, these two cities are not very far apart. Now, let's pick up where we are. Acts chapter number 18, verse 2, and he found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy, with his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. Now, just that one verse alone gives us a huge amount of historical information. That's what we want to look at today with some of the time that we have. So first, let's look at historically where we're at. Historically, from that verse, we note that there are persecutions going on in Rome. We have already identified this time being around 50 AD, and this matches the other piece of information that we have written here under Emperor Claudius. He dies in 54 AD, but so we know that this is sometime around 50 AD. We know then also who is the most famous of the persecutors, Nero. Nero follows Claudius, and he reigns from 55 AD or 54 AD to 68 AD when he finally commits suicide. It is Nero that does the most heinous of things, in which Rome burns, and while Rome is burning, he's playing an instrument, a fiddle, a violin, and it's also he who would so grossly persecute Christians in that time frame. So we can understand then, just from history, that Acts 18 matches the dialogue of what's going on. Aquila and Priscilla are being persecuted, and they are moving out of Italy, and it's possible he's going back to Pontus. Now you say, well, where's Pontus? Very good question. Here's another resource that we can start to look at. Notice here, most of your Bibles have maps in the back of your Bibles, okay? Maps in the back of your Bibles. Some are rather detailed, and some are not. This particular map is entitled The Journeys of Paul the Apostle. And this is really good for understanding where Paul is and what he's doing at certain times. We note right now that we're going to be looking at Corinth, where he is. Remember, we said Athens was close by. Here's Corinth. He has journeyed to the next major metropolitan area, commerce area, to spread the gospel. And that's where he's run into Priscilla and Aquila. Now, Priscilla and Aquila were in Italy, and they have come by here, and they have stopped at this point, and they are into tent making. They're probably making some money here, and this is where Paul comes, and they see each other, because Paul is also a tent maker. He is bivocational. Now, The original question is, where's Pontus? Pontus is actually up in this area. This is this is the area of Galatia. This is where the churches of Galatia are. And this area today is known as Turkey. This area today is known as Turkey. It was called Asia Minor for many years. And if you go into the book of Revelation, this is where the 7 churches are located in the book of Revelation. He was a Jew from Pontus, for whatever reason, goes to Rome, is now being persecuted in Italy, and now comes to Corinth. Let's pick it up. So we've looked a little bit at geography. And if you wanted to do even more geography to understand where Paul is, he has a lot of ministry here in Greece, in Macedonia, Thessalonica, Corinth. He's tried to establish the gospel in Athens. He's doing a lot of work here in the gospel and spreading the gospel. And it just so happens, and here I say that with kind of tongue-in-cheek, he just so happens come across Aquila and Priscilla. Can I just say to you that the just so things happen don't really just so thing happen sort of thing? Because God is providential, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. God is providential, and I want us to see how that works. So with that, we have this situation, this story starting to develop around Aquila and Priscilla. He is a Jew. We don't know anything about Priscilla. We don't know if she's a Jew. And quite frankly, we're not even sure if they're saved yet at this point. We're going to make an assumption, or at least I'm going to make this assumption, it's through Paul that they get saved. Now their entire life changes in a whole nother direction. He may have been coming from Italy to Corinth and was just making some money by making some tent making so they could get back onto Pontus. That was where he thought he was heading, right? How many of you and I have stories like that? We thought we were going in a certain direction, but all of a sudden we came across a change. That change was Jesus Christ, and that changed our life in a whole new direction, and I'm going to show you that a little bit here in a second. With that, let's look at a couple other things. Now, traditionally, again, under the idea of historical, traditionally, some believe that they were martyred, although the scriptures do not give us any of that at all. It's all speculation. Some, and you say, is there any evidence? Well, in some part there is. We know that they have a ministry in Corinth for a while, but we do know that when Paul eventually writes the book of Romans, around 56 A.D., that's where Aquila and Priscilla are, in Romans 16:3. And we also know that at the near time of his death, he mentions Priscilla and Aquila again, and this is now in the 60s A.D. So we know that they were, if I could say, they were in some hot spots. They were in some areas that were not receiving the gospel well. They were very courageous, and they were doing some amazing things. Let's go back to a subject matter we're going to talk about right now. Excuse me. Speaking of providence, you ever wonder why you want to sneeze right at the time you're doing a show? So we have the word providence. Now, there is a misunderstanding, I think, in the area of providence. I solely believe in what we call, from a biblical distinctive, soul liberty and responsibility. In other words, you and I have the freedom to make our choices, but we also must receive the responsibility, the consequences of those choices. However, my choice does not supersede what God can do. I may think I know where I'm going, and I'm moving in a direction, but God is the one that's going to order the steps, right? So remember where we were last week out of Psalm 37. I'll remind you of that now. The steps of a good man are ordered. That means to establish or to build upon. To build upon. Each step I take is built upon the last step I made. If I'm making a step in the direction of God, guess where my steps ultimately are going to bring me? To God, right? My last step prepares for the next step after that. If I am walking in righteousness, that righteousness is always going to lead me to God. If I make the choice to not walk in righteousness and move into unrighteousness, that will indeed move me away from God. But in God's mercy, He gives me lighthouses. He gives me consequences. He gives me bad experiences that cause me to be redirected. But I could choose to be stubborn in it and continue in my evil way. It is obvious then from this text that we just studied last week, Pontus is a devout man. He is trying to seek a good direction. He is trying to take care. He and his wife are trying to do what's right. And guess what? Those steps of a good man are ordered right to Paul. Do you think it's irony that they are tent makers and Paul is the tent maker? Do you think it's irony that just so happened that Paul tried to get a church going in Athens, and even this speech at Mars Hill delays him enough to come to Corinth to speak with Priscilla and Aquila at a time that they were ready to receive it? How God works marvelously. He's a Romans 8:28 God. All things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are called according to His purpose. The issue is always my steps. If I take a step in the direction of righteousness, it's going to land me in a good spot with God. If I take a step in unrighteousness, it's going to cause me to go another way. I am responsible for those steps. So here we are. We have this idea of providence. The problem today is this area that I refer to as Reformed theology, and there may be some watching who would totally disagree with me on this, but I am not a Reformed theology guy. I am not a follower of Reformed theology. And this suggests in their studies, if you carry it out, that man does not have a choice as to where he will end up in heaven or hell, if you go where that's going to go. Okay? Just telling you, that is not where it's going to go. We are given the responsibility of choosing the step. Okay? I can reject it or I can accept it. But in Reformed theology, many hold to the fact that you do not have that choice. It's already been predetermined, and I would totally disagree. So when we talk about the providence of God, we are talking about His ability and foresight, His ability to see where my steps are going to go and how they go there. And He is such a great God that He can interweave whatever is necessary so that my steps as a good man are going to be ordered, established, or built upon to bring me to a place that is exactly what He wants me to be, and the place He exactly wants me to be for the moment that I'm there. It happened in my life. I was not saved. I did not know the Lord as my personal Savior. I was leading a life that was going to lead me to alcoholism. I was an angry, violent man. And when I came to Him, my life changed. And I began to study and look to Jesus and try to do what's right according to what the Bible said. And that led me to another place. And that led me to another place. Ultimately, it led me to a Bible college where ultimately my wife was there and I met her. And ultimately, our ministry began to flourish and go forward. This is no different than Priscilla and Aquila. However, if I had rejected the gospel, if I had turned and gone in a whole other direction, do you think that end would have been the same result? No. But let me leave you with this thought. Here's why, again, I come against the concepts behind Reformed theology. Mordecai comes to Esther back in the Old Testament. Esther has been chosen for such a time as this. She is the one that will come forward and help deliver the Jews out of the hand of Haman and help them to be preserved in a wicked time. She's afraid. Her uncle Mordecai comes to her and says, look, you have been chosen for this. You, by God's providence, by God's will, you are the one to be chosen for this. But if you reject, if you choose, by your free will, choose not to do what God has for you, there will be another way. God will have another way to deliver His people, okay? But as for you, He says, you and your family will be cursed. Do you see, that just blows Reformed theology right out of the works. That was totally a free will choice on Esther's part. Follow God or don't follow God. Do God's will or don't do God's will. It was up to her to make that decision. The step, she makes the good step. She is blessed for that good step. That's where I want to kind of leave it with Priscilla and Aquila today. They are going to be a blessed people. Their life and hardship, their history, their past is full of aches and pains and frustration, but they have come to the place where they're going to discover the purpose of God through the providence of God as he allowed these things to go forward. Go with God today. Think on these things. Let God go with you. You will be blessed, and he is worth it. Bye.